You're listening to Maneuvering Mondays, a podcast about transforming work culture.
And your hosts today are AK
and Ivana Rosendal.
And welcome back. This is one of our book swap episodes where we discuss a business book and apply its learnings to Marie's story in Maneuvering Monday. And in Maneuvering Monday, we follow Marie, who is a young female leader trying to navigate a work life, struggling under the weight of outdated structures sometimes. She's trying to do the right thing, but like many of us, she finds that the right thing sometimes comes with a cost. It can be emotional, sometimes professional, and sometimes financial. And today we're joined by you, Rikke Lundsfryd. You're the author of the book Meget mindre in Danish, directly translated much less. And it's a great book that shines a light on one of the most persistent gender gaps, our pension savings. And today we'll be exploring this topic in the context of Maneuvering Monday, how money and systems shape women's decision-making. And today it will not just be about retirement, but also in all the steps along the way. So welcome, Rikke. We're so happy that you're here.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm very glad to be here. And Rikke, this is one of those chance encounters. You and I were both engaging in a post on LinkedIn from one of the great female leaders here in Copenhagen, who has a shoe brand and was. I actually don't remember exactly what the post was about.
Me neither. I'm not sure either.
But we both engaged in that post, and for some reason or other, I looked at your profile because I was like, "Ooh, she made a really good point." And then I read through your experience. I saw that you had just published the book that we're going to discuss today, and I ordered the book right away. And I just had to reach out to you and say hello and see if there was something we could do together, because I just loved your energy and also the points that you made in your profile. And to my amazing luck, you actually responded to my message.
Well, I was so happy that you reached out.
And we've since then we've actually got to meet each other in person. You came to attend our book launch. And every interaction with you so far has just been inspiring and awesome. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for your kind words.
And Rikke, can you tell us more about how did you end up writing this book, and how did you get to a point where you learned enough about finances to be able to teach others?
So I've been in the financial industry for almost my entire adult life, working with insurance and pension and investment. And at some point, I turned toward management instead, and therefore I also wanted to learn more about management. So I went and took a business management degree at university, and later on I also became an NLP master coach as well. When I left my previous job, I was the COO in an insurance and pension broker company. I was responsible for IT development, compliance and operations. Now I work independent as an interim and part-time COO for companies that doesn't have the need or the budget for a full-time COO. And I also do management consulting and compliance or governance programs. And I'm very eager to talk about women's finances today, because I think we are on the edge of a breakthrough where women will begin to demand a bigger ownership on all the assets in society. Yeah. As we've seen in your book as well, women's economic status as the underdog probably has an impact and significance when it comes to making economic decisions. So I think it's very interesting to discuss the topic further today.
That's awesome. And in your book, we kind of read a lot of information. I learned a lot of things that I didn't know. And I'm actually, I would argue I'm one of the more well-informed people about pensions. I've saved for retirement since my first job. I've always, whenever I could, invested my own stock profiles.
Yeah.
And yet, I learned a lot by reading your book. And also, what I loved about it is that it was so funny. Like I I was sitting in an airplane and like laughing out loud with people looking at me. And then I was just like, it's.
I'm very glad to hear that, because when I was writing the book about, women's pension savings, then I really wanted not to bore anyone to death, because I know the topic can be a bit complicated and something that people tend to avoid. So I really wanted to be easy read. That was important to me.
Yeah, that definitely succeeded. And I can also say there's actually a test you can take in the book where you can kind of see your own type. And I think that maybe like Ivana, just also to set the stage, I'm not completely lost, but I think I had most of the B answers, which meant that I was like, you still have, you're like completely average. You have you know something, but you also still have something to learn. And I think I learned a lot. It's a very concrete book with a lot of really good, tangible tools you can go out and apply it directly after reading it.
Well, perfect. I'm very glad to hear that, because I really tried to make it uncomplicated and non-scary to talk about pension and retirement and investment. That's something we need to talk more about, as is something that we still lack information clearly about.
Totally agree. And that's also why we're so excited to do this episode. And it is, as we also just briefly talked about it in the pre discussion we had before recording, that of course our book Manuring Monday is not about pension, but it is about a young female leader navigating, as I also said in the intro, the structures in this world. And just to set a bit of a stage, if people didn't read Manuring Monday, I will quickly wrap up what it's about, and then also start talking a bit about the topics that are kind of related to your book, Rikke. So what we'll be doing now is we'll try to connect the dots between the two books. And in our book, we follow the fictional story of Marie, who is a young female leader, as I said. She's the head of development HR in Zebra Apps, which is an ed tech company. And in the beginning of the book, we learn that employees are fleeing from this company. And Marie, being in HR, is tasked with finding out why and with trying to fix it. And then she launches this big culture program and she tries to improve the situation. But while she does this, she learns a lot about how dysfunctional the company really is. And also that it's much more than only keeping the good people there. It's also actually really deep financial trouble and structural issues. And I think that her story is full of emotional labor. There's a lot of managing relationships. There's a lot of smoothing conflict, self-sacrificing to keep the things running. She works a lot. She also works unpaid, often on weekends, we learn. And all the while she does this, she also has a child that she has to pick up. She has a husband that is constantly on her back for working too much. And we had this whole theme in the book that we had to cut a little bit because we did have to make some. We had to cut some of the many pages in the editorial process. But we had this whole theme about being a woman in the modern world where we have to like both have a career and be the primary caregiver at home. And I think that's somehow related to the topic of why women's pensions are smaller than men's. Yeah. So that's that was just to set the stage. I don't know, Ivana, do you have anything to add?
I think that's a great segue, and that's also one of the points you make in your book. Like why are women's pensions so much smaller? And it's some of these dynamics.
Exactly. Well, and more labor in the household, and more responsibility for taking care of the kids, more maternity leave, more part-time. That is, of course, one of the reasons that women's pensions are so much smaller than men's. But there are also more to it than just the extra labor in the household, because women are also perhaps struck by some kind of gender bias where we are perceived to be more afraid of taking investment risk and financial risk. And that is perhaps not entirely true, but perhaps it's also because of the way we are socialized. So one of the points that I make in my book is that we as women should obtain more knowledge so that our risk profiles are not just perhaps put on us by men who perhaps see us as more fearful and frightened to take financial investment risk that may not actually be true. But perhaps there is more to it when it comes to the way that we talk about making investment risk and the way that the words that we use when we talk about it. And I think we can perhaps circle back to that later on,
Yes.
but that is something that I find very interesting, and I think it is important in this kind of discussion.
Yeah. It's interesting, like the perceived risk appetite in women. I did a podcast recording with AbbVie, which is a pharmaceutical company, because they had just released a study showing that for certain medical devices, women who benefit from the same device as much as men get asked only every fifth time compared to men whether they would be willing to wear this device because they're perceived as less technologically savvy.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
Yeah.
They don't even get the opportunity.
No. Yeah, well, that is a perfect example, or terrifying example,
Yes.
actually. Not perfect. Yeah.
I think we are ready to dive deeper into the actual book swap session. And for this session, we'll give you a piece of information from Maneuvering Monday as a story. And then this is where we're going to apply some of the principles in Rikke's book to Maneuvering Monday. And the first one I would like to dive deeper into is, well, women's relationship to money. Because in Maneuvering Monday, we have the character Natalie. And Natalie, she is the CEO of Zebra Apps. She co-founded the company with Richard. Richard is an engineer, and Natalie used to be a teacher. And together they founded this edtech company. And for Richard, the new company is all about building a great place to work for engineers, use some cool gaming technology to create good learning experiences. And Natalie is trying to make teachers' and students' lives easier. And then Zebra Apps hits into a financial wall, and they have trouble raising money. And we don't actually see this in the book, but it is referred to. Natalie and Richard have a fight, and Richard leaves. And this leads Natalie to primarily be driven by fear of financial ruin, and try to optimize all decisions for like having money in the bank here and now. That's kind of like the big backdrop of what happens in the book is basically Natalie's fear of financial failure. And Rikke, I would be very curious, well, what are women's relationships with finances? And are we really afraid of being incompetent or maybe even stupid?
Well, to some extent, I think there are some women who are afraid to ask stupid questions and perhaps seem as they are not in control or they are weaker. And especially if we look at a management level where women tend to take on a masculine suit, so to speak, in order to fit in, to really be taken serious. So I think women tend to have some kind of fright to be actually perceived less responsible or capable. But when we look at companies led by women, we don't see that they are affected negatively. On the other side, we see that women are actually improving the financial decisions making in companies, where men, they tend to outperform in growth women, they outperform men when it comes to making very good and sound financial decisions. So I would say that in the case with Natalie, she is perhaps just not a great CEO. It's perhaps not that she is a woman. It's definitely not that she is a woman, but actually she is perhaps just not that much of a CEO person. And of course, she is also a product of the way that she was brought up and everything that she's learned about fitting in between all the men in the industry. But when we look at her actions, I would say of course, it's driven by fear to some extent, but it's not because she's a woman. It's more that she is a product of her surroundings and the way she was socialized. Yeah. So I would say she could do better in another job. But if we look at it in, general speaking about women and finances, we see that women, of course, they don't have the same relationship with financial decision making as men because we don't have generations of experience behind us. Because looking back in history, women has been left out of financial decision making. So we are fairly new to it. And we still lack the same perspective on girls and women as financial capable beings. So again, the socialization is key, I would say, because when you are brought up as a girl, being told to be careful and thoughtful and calm and not to rush into making decisions, then if you look at the positive side effects of that, you will probably make very good financial decisions. But if you are not put in a position where you're able to use all those good things that you learned, then perhaps you will switch over to be more frightened and more careful and perhaps a bit slow in making decisions because you will hold back in fear of making a wrong decision.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would say I think that we are doing better now, raising the children today, socializing them to be able to do anything, no matter their gender. But I think to some extent we still have a girl-boy problem when it comes to perhaps just thinking that the girls are more careful by nature and not willing to take on as much risk as the boys. And is that really true? Or is it something that we still haven't unlearned because we are so used to looking at kids in that perspective? So changing that is something that will probably take a long time. I don't think we will just get it over within in a few years. It will probably take several generations.
That's the hard truth. I'm reading a book right now, which anyone who has spoken to me in the last couple of days will know everything about because it is making a big impact on me. It's a book by Caitlin Moran called What About Men? Caitlin Moran is a feminist writer, and now she's written a book about men. And I'm learning a lot about like the differences for how men and girls or boys and girls are being treated when growing up. And where girls may have like a lack of, could say, financial risk taking that we don't learn when we're little, but boys don't really learn like how to resolve conflict or how to express their feelings or how to be supportive of one another. And to me, like this was a big shock. Like, wait, what? We are teaching our children like vastly different skill sets. Both of which are necessary to be a well-functioning human being.
Exactly. not expressing their emotional needs and and I think that is probably why when you have management with different perspectives and different both genders, of course, but also when you are from different backgrounds, you will have all these perspectives into your decision making, and it will make it more holistic and make the decisions more healthy and thought through. But I still think we have a culture, and I also think we see that in your book, that the women in management, they tend to take on too much of the masculine environment.
Yeah.
So instead of bringing in their feminine perspective, they will try to adapt to the masculine environment and to really just fit in, because it's always easier to fit in than to bring a whole different perspective and another way of looking at the world or at the problem, at the financial troubles that Zebra's in your book. It's easier to just go on as always, and it's never easy to be the minority. So when you are less women in management, it's natural that you'll perhaps to some extent try to just adapt to their way of speaking, dressing, managing their the people in the organization, troubleshooting solutions. Well, you just go about with your old ways of doing it. And I think that is something that we still really need to have a way of dealing with. We haven't found very good solutions to how to try to implement new ways of adapting to a more, perhaps, well, I wouldn't say feminine culture, but a more holistic culture that also includes the feminine perspective.
Yeah, I would agree. But I think that one thing to be done now, Ivana and I, we both have girls, and we can of course try to break this cycle by teaching like the holistic way of approaching things. So both the more emotional, soft parts that are traditionally a woman's responsibility, but also financials and how to do that, which is traditionally the man's responsibility.
Absolutely.
And the same, of course, for people who have sons.
Yeah, teaching them how to express their emotional needs and, solving conflicts, engaging with other people in perhaps a more useful way, so they are more able to, resolve those conflicts growing up and participating in different discussions.
Well, if we continue to the next example we have from the book, let's talk about money and labor distribution in the home. In Maneuvering Monday, Marie is married to Thomas, and both Marie and Thomas are at an offsite with their work at the same time. Marie is set to pick up their daughter from school. But as readers will know, a lot of drama happens at this offsite that Marie is at, and she is late. And that leads to, a month-long conflict between Thomas and Marie, because Thomas expresses dissatisfaction about Marie prioritizing her work. And one of the fights that we experience as readers is that Marie tries to argue, they were both at an offsite, and potentially Thomas could have also picked up their daughter. And I would be curious about going back to the saving for retirement and why women end up with much less. It's all this time we spend away from the career to take care of children, to take care of relatives. but also like what kind of financial instruments do we have to correct some of this? In the book, you make a very I would say audacious almost suggestion that men should just transfer some of their pension savings to their wives. For me, when I read that, I was like, okay, exploding head. But at the same time, actually, this makes sense.
Yeah, I would argue that it makes perfectly sense because, well, first of all, women take most of the leave when a child is born. And that makes probably sense, I would say. And I'm not here to tell anyone to take less leave, or I'm not here to tell anyone to do anything else that fits their family's needs. So it's very important for me to say that I don't want this to end up being the children's problem. It's a problem for us adults to solve. But when we look at the way women work, if you are working full-time and you have a child, then only every second women will return to full-time job afterwards. The rest will be working part-time. And then if you look 5 years out in the future, 40% is still working part-time. So it's not just short-term, because maternity leave is short-term. We can, make arrangements on the money that you are not saving on your retirement savings in your maternity leave. But when we are talking years and years of working part-time, then it will affect your retirement savings a lot. So actually, I'm very serious about men should put something into the women's savings, or at least you should agree on a prenup if you're not transferring any money to the part-time working part, because it could also be the men, of course, who are taking the part-time working less when you have small children. It's not the case in most cases, but it could be. But if you are not in a financial position where you can transfer extra money to the women's pensions for if she is the one taking on part-time, then I would advise you to agree on a prenup. And you should do it while you're still friends, because it's very difficult to do it when you're, signing the divorce papers. Then it's most likely that you will not have half of his pension. And that is, in Danish law, at least, something special, that the pension savings, they are not split in divorce like the rest of the common assets you have in the relationship. And not everybody knows that. And it can cost you a lot of money when it comes to divorce. And we know half of all relationships, they end up in a divorce or a split. So I think you should have the conversation with your partner, even though you're not plan on having kids or on the edge of having kids. Well, just have the conversation. If for some reason one of you has to take more responsibility in taking care of, elderly in the family or children, or for whatever reason, then perhaps it's only fair that you compensate the person who will take that extra responsibility on them. So, yeah, it might sound a little bold, but I think it's only fair, actually. And I would argue that it's something that we just need to have an open conversation about in our relationships with our partner. Then we can decide for ourselves, because, of course, what will work in my family might not work in your family. So everyone has to decide for themselves, but we need to have the conversation at least.
I think it's difficult because it's a topic that's a bit, it's perceived as not being super romantic or super sexy to talk about this. Also, it could create conflict, like if you have to suggest your husband gives you half of his pension, or at least transfer some of the money. It could be a potential, conflict. And of course, people would like to avoid that. So I think it's such a good point that we need to not be afraid to have these talks, even though it's traditionally not seen as romantic, but I think that's also something we need to change.
Exactly. And that's a good point, because I've actually had some readers of my book come up to me and tell me, well, I have been thinking about taking this conversation with my partner, but I was a bit frightened to make this conflict, so I have been avoiding it. But after reading your book, I showed him that page and I was like, well, it's not me saying that we should have a prenup. It's written here in the book. So it was kind of, validating that she was now having the conversation with him. So that's actually something I think people tend to avoid. And I understand that. It's not romantic and it's definitely not that sexy, but we can make it into something more natural and normal that we just talk about, and we take the emotions out of it, because it's a fact that a lot of relationships comes to an end at some point. So let's just make it very unemotional and just very normal to have that conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It's just a conversation. It's nothing. Scary.
And so cool that you gave that couple permission to have that conversation.
Yes.
That's making a difference.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. You are now granted permission to have the conversation. Yeah.
Well, it is not only women who can be in a unexpected situation. I want to talk about saving for the unexpected, which can happen to all of us. And in Maneuvering Monday, and for listeners who don't like spoilers, now is the time to skip ahead, because something may be spoiled right now. Skip ahead. In the end of the book, Mark, who is the head of HR, is facing an unexpected future. He ends up being burned out by his job and not really knowing what to do next. And this is a situation that can occur to all of us. We can suddenly be standing outside of the labor market, expectedly or unexpectedly. And in your book, you also give some advice for how our pension savings can actually create opportunities for us if we consider them, at least when we plan ahead. So what can we do to create this buffer of opportunities for ourselves?
Yeah. So, well, if you start early and start saving for your retirement early, then you are already way ahead, because then you will have the benefit of the interest rate, and it will just accumulate faster and faster, and then you will be a wealthy person when you reach retirement age. On the other hand, if you start rather late in life, you will have to put aside much more money, and it will be a financial problem perhaps for you to put aside so much money each month. So I really want to encourage people to start early, because then they will also early in life have the opportunity to start putting money aside for, well, am I allowed to curse in this podcast?
You are allowed to curse.
Yes, please.
Because then you can have fuck you money put aside. Yeah. And when you have, your pension savings is on track and you have this accumulating interest rate just working for you, then you have actually extra space in your financial situation to put aside money on an account, and you could also invest them. That will be very good for you. If you don't have any short-term use of the money, then it's a good idea to invest them. And when you do that, then you have the freedom to actually just say, well, F you, I'm taking some time off, I'm burned out, I'm not able to work right now because I need to take care of myself. Mm-hmm. And I would say you have a much better opportunity to do that when you already have your retirement savings on track, because then it's not a worry for you. And I also in my book talk about diversifying your risk. And one of the ways you can do that is also by having not only one big pension savings, but have like money in your house, money in the bank, money in stocks. When you have different, piles of money, then you also have the opportunity to be more, agile in the way you plan ahead, and you are not necessarily bound to take a job that you are not thriving in, or where you actually need the time to just, regain your energy and find your next perfect project to work on. So I really would love for people to diversify the way that they invest and the way they save money. And also, again, I must say, if you start early, you don't have to put aside a lot of money, but if you start early, then you really have the huge benefit of the effect of the interest rate that will work for you every single day.
Yeah, something that actually surprised me when reading your book was, and maybe I misunderstood, but you now can check with you. I think it said that your pension will be typically more or less the same as if you invest in a house or an apartment. Because I think that many people think that, buying like real estate is the best way to save up a lot of money. But you actually write something about that. It's typically like about the same, actually, the size of your pension when you retire.
Yeah. Well, it
of course, depending on where you live.
And depending on your situation. But it can actually be the biggest individual investment that you will make in your life, because sometimes you own a house with your partner. Of course, you can also own a house by yourself. But for many people, the pension savings will be the biggest individual investment you will ever make. So when you look at it that way, I think that you should really pay some interest to it, because a lot of people actually, they don't know where their pension savings are placed. Like, who holds my money? How are they invested? I mean, let's just imagine that I would come to you and tell you, well, that money you put aside for your pension savings each month, just give it to me and I will take it somewhere. You don't have to worry about it, Don't think about it. I will take care of it and I will give it back to you when you're like 70 or whenever you can retire, right? And you would probably say, no, I want to know where you take my money.
What happens. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But people just really don't
trust.
Know. Or a lot of people. A lot of people trust their employer who will put the money aside for them, Well, I don't know. They take care of it. It just, floats to some other account each month, but I'm not sure. And another perspective on that is it's been a lot more common for women to invest in stocks, and that is a big improvement. I'm very happy that it's like platforms like Female Invest, for instance, have made it more, just normal, and a lot of very educational videos and stuff like that. And that is all great. But I really want to make a point about, if you plan on, spending like, I don't know, 300 Danish crowns per month or whatever to try to make investments and put it in some, I'll place it in Novo or whatever. And you want to do that. It's great. But if you are not aware on your own pension savings and how they are invested, then I would say you're not allowed to do that before you have actually obtained knowledge on the investment on your pensions, because that is thousands of kroners each month, right? So you're not allowed to play around with small money before you have actually learned and also made your own choice on how should my pension savings be invested each month. Yeah, that is kind of a big deal for me, because I think it's great that a lot of women now are participating more. We need women to participate more in, obtaining more shares and stocks, but we also need them to really look into their pension savings investment first.
And also back to the fuck you money that you talked about before in relation to Mark's need for a break from the workplace. I also heard like a future thinking thought leader talk about how pension is something that we might see change over the next years. The way you think about pension, and today or traditionally it's been this idea that you work a full work life and then you have X amount of years where you just live off your pension. But that's a bit outdated because many people would actually like to have this type of work life where you work for a period, then you take a break while you're young, you have maybe small kids, you can travel, you can do something with your family before you're 75 and can need to relax more because your body is getting older. So I like this idea of thinking of it more dynamically instead of having this old school way of thinking it in two big pieces of like, then you work, then you don't work. But,
true.
Yeah.
And I also think that we hopefully will see some change in the way the legislation is right now, because there are some boundaries if we really want to have that change in the way we work in the future. But I think hopefully we will see that the demands from the working people will affect the way we have the legislation right now in the future.
Yeah. More investment related topics.
Mm-hmm.
I want to touch on sustainable investment. In Maneuvering Monday, we have Jason. Jason is a user experience designer, and he is the one that quits in the very first chapter and then ends up coming back, and also trying to fix Aslo, which is one of the key products of Zebra apps. So Jason has this code that he adheres to for developing software that is for children. And his slogan is, children's brains are not for financial gains. And in your book, you also mentioned that there is the idea of investing sustainably with your money, and that it actually makes good business sense. I want to ask you to tell us more about what is this Venn diagram overlap between sustainable investment and profit, and how can we make the pie bigger for everyone by the way we invest?
Yeah, so now you can actually have your money go do good. And when you would if you just looked a few years back, it was actually a bit difficult. And that was because of the risk diversification and, the lack of risk diversification. Because looking only a few years back, the options you had to invest in a more sustainable way was very limited. And therefore, if the market took a dive, then it will impact your investments a lot in a negative way. And nowadays, you have so much more you can invest in that are still sustainable. And because you have the opportunity to risk diversify today, then you can still have the same good interest rate as in the non-sustainable investments. So if you had a conversation with an advisor in the financial industry years ago, they would probably tell you, if you want to use your investment, if you want to do your investments in the sustainable way, you will lose some of your interest rate. You will simply earn less. So it will cost you money to do good with your money. And therefore, of course, people were not that eager to place large investments like their pension savings in sustainable options. But luckily, because we see the whole change towards a more sustainable way of working, we now have a lot of options. So the days where the options were limited are over, and you can have the same interest rate or some to some extent the same interest rate. Of course, it can always, fluctuate. But for most of the investments, you will see that they do as good as the rest of the market. So now it's no longer something that you have to avoid if you are afraid of losing money or not earning as much money as the non-sustainable investments. So if you want to do good with your money, then it's also still a perfectly good way to invest and have your money go benefit in the society and make you money as they are, invested. So that's a very good development that we have seen.
I think that's a great positive note to kind of switch over to talk a bit about the book publishing process for your book, because we're interested to look at that as well. And I think specifically we would like to hear about how your journey was toward finding and working with the publisher you chose. Maybe also talking a bit about the creative control of your brand.
Yeah, well, for me, it was important to find a smaller publisher. And that was because I was afraid of giving too much control away if I were to be at a bigger publisher. I haven't tried that, so perhaps I'm totally wrong and in thinking it that way, but that was just the way that I felt. I felt more comfortable at a smaller publisher. And so the publisher that I chose to publish my book at is a publisher who also published the book The Psychology of Money, which is, it's also about the structural way of thinking money in society. And I thought that, there must be some match in the way that we look at it, because I, of course, want to educate about, very concrete about pension savings and how you should make sure as a woman that you are insured properly and everything. But I also want to talk about the structural changes that I think we need to address if we want to see a change in the gap between men and women financially. And I felt that there was a great match in the way we were thinking, the publisher and I. So for me, it was very easy to make that decision when I first found them and had an initial talk with them. They were very keen to take on the book and they believed in the project. So that was also very great that they right away thought it was a good idea and wanted to publish it. Yeah, so actually that part was quite easy for me.
Did you approach them with the manuscript, or did you approach them with the idea of what your book should be?
It was actually only the idea, and I kind of had an outline of the book. So I knew, like, I made the skeleton of the book, and I knew what I wanted to put in the book, but I didn't have like a chapter yet or something like that. So yeah, it was they believed in the idea and they liked the outline, and then I went home and started writing like a maniac.
That is very cool. Yeah. We started kind of looking for publishers before we had written anything, but we found it really hard to actually do that because many publishers wanted to have like an outline or some more, or they wanted to know more about what the book was about. And we didn't really know where the story would go when we started. So we actually ended up finishing the manuscript before we engaged with the publisher that we ended up with. So that's interesting.
I think that is probably also a very common way of doing it. I think it's fair to say that I was lucky to just have bump into a publisher that bought my idea immediately and liked it and was also into investment themselves. So they probably, they saw some common interest here. Because I think most publishing companies would rather have the manuscript before they would decide. So I think your way of doing it is probably the most common way.
But we actually also considered self-publishing, and we had we met with some people who did that, but we found out that it would probably be harder for us because we didn't already have a very established audience. We didn't have like a brand that people already knew, so it would be harder, I think, for us to do it completely on our own. But I think that if we're publishing another book, which we are working on, we will probably try to do it ourselves this time.
Yeah. I would probably not because I think I would depend on, the editorial help, and I was really glad that I had that from my publisher. A lot of good talks and discussions about how we should frame the book, and I think I would. Well, you can obviously buy that from some external company if you self-publish, but I thought about it also, of course, because you have to consider it. But for me, it was it would probably have been different if I was unable to have a contract with a publisher. Then I would perhaps think of it differently. But it was not really in the picture for me because it was an easy process with the publisher.
Yeah. I will also say that I am now addicted to editorial help.
Yeah.
Because they are just brilliant and understand
really
exactly what it takes to write a book.
Yeah.
So writing is good and well, but editing, that's where the magic really happens.
True. It really is true. Yeah. Because you can just write something and it is, clear as the sky to you when you read it again. And then someone else will read it and they'll be like, what are you talking about? So it's really great to have that help and also to kill the darlings that, we would probably not do if we were all by ourselves, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's a third of our book died in editing. That was harsh.
Many darlings.
So many darlings.
Even characters we had to completely kill off because it was like there's not space for this person in the story. But I think it's so much better now. So it was really good advice from our publisher.
Yeah.
We are actually very excited to start working on our next book. I am not allowed to until we publish our audiobook.
But you will not reveal anything about what the book will be about.
Well, I will reveal that it is we will stay in the same genre. It'll also be a work fiction story, but it is going to be a completely unique work with a different angle, but kind of leaning further into this chaotic, there are no right answers kind of situation, but we can reflect and learn a lot from discussing the story.
Interesting. Well, I'm looking forward to reading that.
Thank you. And I will say that the really cool thing about the publisher we ended up working with is that they have this model where you can purchase specific parts of the process. We just, in this case, we bought everything. Yeah. But next time, I think we might pick and choose a little bit more. But we'll probably still end up buying support for the editorial process and maybe also the PR, which has been so amazing.
Well, Rikke, I want to end this episode with asking you some big questions. In the end of the show, we try to kind of raise our gaze and look up at what is the state of work. And for you, I would be curious to learn more about, where are we heading as a society towards more financial equality between the genders? Are we heading for more less?
Well, that depends on where you measure, because we just recently learned that when we look at the gap between the way the genders are paid, we actually took a bump back. So now the gap is bigger, between men and women. But when we look at, pension savings, it is moving forward. We are making the gap smaller, but it's very slow progress. So I would like to speed things up. I think that we are not doing enough because we still lack the big conversation in all of society about women not possessing as much as men. Not just in pension savings, but in total, men, they just own more property and more stocks. And so I think we still need to push that agenda further, not just talk about equal pay, because, of course, that is also something to still talk about, but that is the least of our problems, to be honest, because the gap in pension savings are twice the size. So let's talk about that before we talk any more about equal pay. But I think we need to realize that we have to teach them young if we really want to make a change here, because we need to look at the way that we socialize the children. We need to teach them about investment and, making good financial decisions for yourself. Teach them about, household economy in schools. We are not doing that. And we could make them much more capable of making good decisions if we started to put this in the school books. Why not have that as something that you should learn about in school? What is investment and how do you do your own household economic and stuff like that? So I think that is something that will make the gap smaller, faster, if we try to teach our children, better habits early. Yeah,
totally agree.
So that is something.
And to do that, we need to be educated, right? So to do that,
exactly.
Yeah, we need to learn it so we can pass it on.
Yeah, exactly. So of course we are moving in the right direction, but it's slow, and it's too slow for me at least. And I think more and more women, they also have, seen that this actually is something that is not fair and that we need to pursue more in order to make it go faster. At least then for your daughters and all the small children that are growing up now. So they shouldn't have the same big gap between men and women in the future, right? So we can make it better for them.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And to do that, I would just recommend that people read your book in Danish, meget mindre. Order it. It is fun. It is also a very quick read. Quick and entertaining, although it does take some referencing back to once you actually start figuring out how this applies to your financial situation.
Yeah, exactly. Then you need to invest like an hour to just go over your financial situation. Yes. It's not actually something that you need to put a lot of effort in, but I would recommend that you use an hour once a year to go over it. Then you should be fine. Yeah, and if you're not into reading the book, then you can also listen, because I am actually hosting a podcast over the themes in my book, and I will be joined by some very qualified people that will make sure that we understand this problem to its full extension, and they will help me find solutions and suggestions for women to make the gender gap smaller when it comes to the pension savings and investments.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to share through our LinkedIn page when your podcast airs, so that people can
so much.
Follow up. Rikke, this has been an amazing conversation. I loved how finances are such a thread in our lives. and impacts both our decisions, way of thinking, and the dynamics both at home and in the workplace. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today.
Very inspiring.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So great.